we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark podcast. If you ever wanted to let us know for a topic or let us know what you think, whatever you like, hit us up in our comments under our videos on YouTube. If you're watching, make sure to subscribe and like the videos and all that good stuff. Check out our Patreon and share with your friends. Again, I always appreciate everyone who takes their time to spend it with us, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to do tonight's episode because it was a little bit of a spur of the moment choice because it was such a topic. So right now it's November 21st, 2023, in lovely Hamilton, Ontario, where we are recording right now. But actually, probably as we speak, the band Alt J is finishing a show at History in Toronto, a second night. They played last night too. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the band Alt J. And they had two shows at History in Toronto. My buddy Nick was there. My buddy Mo is there tonight. And it is... I might chalk it up there with one of the bigger regrets of shows that I didn't go to. Again, I'm here with you lovely folks tonight, so I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. And had band practice last night, which wasn't necessarily pre-planned. I still probably could have got the ticket and got out of it, but we have a big show coming up. My band, Reckless Harbor. Check out Reckless Harbor, everybody. If you guys like indie folk, we're your folk. And we're getting ready for a show at the Dakota Tavern in Toronto, November 25th. If you guys are listening to this is going to be out November 22nd. So if you are listening, if you catch the podcast before then, if you're in Toronto, Ontario, on the 25th between 8 and 10, come on down to the Dakota Tavern and folk out with the boys from Reckless Harbor. But again, definitely up there with one of my bigger regrets of shows that I missed, because not only from the glaring reviews from Nicholas Pickles, but just my love for this band is interesting because I really love their debut album, but I also just love them as musicians. They're such like talented, seemingly like genius level in my opinion, just phenomenal band. And again, like I mentioned, Alt J isn't actually their name. Their true name is the triangle symbol, like the delta symbol, which also means change, which I think is so fucking cool. And it's cool to be like a band that's actually a symbol. But Alt J is actually like, if you're on a Mac and you hit the key Alt and J, you get the delta symbol. And again, used in mathematics and science to indicate change. And so again, it's actually stylized as Alt J, which is really interesting. I thought it was super cool. But they're originally from England. They were founded in 2007 in Leeds. Joe Newman, lead vocals and guitar, Tom Sonny Green, drums, and Gus Unger Hamilton on keys and vocals. And Tom Sonny Green, which I guess he likes to adopt the middle name because he'd be Tom Green, which is fine. God bless Tom Green, famous Canadian comedian. But he is super interesting. I mean, like any great band, any band worth their salt anyway, has a great drummer, and Alt J with Tom Green is no fucking exception. Like I mentioned, the two shows in Toronto at History were actually to mark the 10th anniversary of An Awesome Wave, which is their first album, which I mentioned, which is my favorite album. They've released subsequent songs and albums, and I like their stuff. But I really fell in love with this album, and I wish I had my fucking eyes and ears open more. I don't know. I just wish I made it to that show, because there's some other shows that I haven't made it to, and I didn't see Rush before Neil Peart died, and I always regret that. That's the biggest one I can think of right now. Anyway, I'm happy I got to see the Tragically Hip. I'm happy that I got to see Roger Waters and David Gilmour. I'm happy I got to see most of the members of Yes especially before Chris Squire died. So again, I guess I'll take the good with the bad there. I think I did miss a Pearl Jam show in London when I was living there, which was an interesting move. But I got to see them in Detroit not long after. So you win some, you lose some. Sometimes you miss out on shows, and what are you going to do? But again, An Awesome Wave has always been a really special album to me for many different reasons. One, because it came out in 2012, I think end of 2012. I mean, if it's the 10th anniversary, it's 2023. So you tell me, Alt J. Anyway, when it came out, I was still in university, and when I was in school, when I was studying, I wasn't really like a silent study kind of guy. I didn't want to have no noise, complete silence, but I needed something going in my head to kind of keep things going, to kind of keep me distracted. And I did this like little study session with this guy who was working at McMaster to like help with like some study strategies and stuff. And kind of one of the things he said is that if you do want to listen to music, I think he actually said silence is best, I should say. But if you do want to listen to music, don't listen to music with like a lot of lyrics that are going to kind of take your mind away from the study. And I do find that rings true, especially like I can't really listen to any hip hop when I study. Like I just get so trained to listen to the lyrics that I'm really not going to focus on what I'm reading or trying to study. Classical is obviously great. No lyrics there. That's always great to listen to. I used to listen to a lot of that. But what I also started listening to as the years went on, I started listening to just whole albums. And I would listen to them so many times that I would just get so used to the content that I wouldn't think about them so much. And I'd listen to them going to and from the library, on my bike, like just ripping and gripping and just taking it in. And it was like these albums basically became a part of those memories. When I look back and think about those times and think about those moments where I was studying, or those moments where I, again, moving around London and because again, I took my bike everywhere. So I'm throwing headphones in, I'm fucking rocking and rolling, working out, doing all this stuff. I mean, working out's different. I always had a playlist for that, of course. But again, so when I listen back to all these albums, they take me right back to that place. And it's like mildly dissociative maybe sometimes, but again, it just like triggers all those memories, and it's so special. And I've talked about it before on the podcast and stuff, and it's like there's some times where I feel, being a musician, being an artist, whatever your endeavor is, if it's a creative one, or in whatever, even in work, I'm sure people experience the same idea too, but like where you kind of start to question yourself, where you go, why am I in this? And it's not just for money, it's not just for fame, whatever it is, whatever drives you. But at least where I'm in a musician, why I'm a musician, why I want to be, is I want to be able to provide that base for people. I want to provide that memory for people. I also want to be able to be a safe, take people out of their thoughts. If they're having a rough day, they can throw on some of my music and listen to it and be like, wow, that's something special. That would be amazing. But again, if I can somehow be a part of that, those memories for somebody, and whether it's at a show or It'd be great if if it was on a soundtrack or something like that too. But it's the soundtrack for movies and television is one thing, but you want to be, as corny as it sounds, the soundtrack to someone's life. And I believe that that's what happens, right? And it's sad that the idea of the album has kind of, slowly passed. And, still in 2012, 2013, up in those days, there were still people were still clinging to like releasing albums, but now it's all about streaming, and it's all about getting on playlists, and albums are great and they still come out, but they're not always conceived as these start to finish pieces of art like that were so complete in so many ways. And I've talked about it on another episode where I just talk about vinyl and how much that means, and that's how much I can talk about it. But go check that episode out if you haven't seen it. But this whole idea that the physical record itself was limiting. You could only put so much music on that. So you knew whatever you were going to write, it had to fit in those 48 minutes, 24 minutes aside. And when you're writing that and you're thinking about that, you're trying to cram everything into that moment, or you're picking certain songs to go in certain order, so you're invoking certain emotions and things like that. And then on top of that, you have the packaging of the record, this whole opportunity to put all this artwork and liner notes and information and all types of different things out there for people to say, hey, like, or at least a way that you can kind of like get the entire picture, if you will. But like the artist can portray a little bit more of their whole idea through the physical copy of the album. They can get more of their idea across, where with streaming, that's all it is. It's just streaming. And you're not really going to get that feel even with album artwork. And yeah, sometimes you're able to blow it up basically the size of your little phone screen, and you can get a little bit more across, and maybe some video content in there and things like that. But the days are gone right now, at least for the album. Hopefully they'll come back. As much as there's been this big boom for vinyl, again, just the way people get their artwork out, you have to just choose one way or the other, right? So you can get away with just putting one song at a time, 2 songs here and there, and not worrying about an album. But again, so beautiful. It's so amazing that Alt J put this album out as their first album. It's definitely up there with one of the great debut albums. Up there with Pearl Jam's 10, up there with Stevie Wonder's first album. What's the Dire Straits. Tremendous. There's so many. Led Zeppelin 1. It's definitely up there with one of the greats. It kind of was. And speaking of Dire Straits, it was kind of this, when An Awesome Wave came out, it kind of was this paradigm shift. I mean, you had a lot of like indie rock and indie pop kind of things happening in the late 2000s, but when An Awesome Wave came out, it just kind of blew everyone away. And I think there was probably an underground movement of that like mildly acid jazzy inspired pop, indie rock fusion, whatever you want to call Alt J. But it just came out and it was just so amazing. I was so struck by it. Again, the album cover is amazing. It's like the Ganges River Delta that's on there that has beautiful coloring and just gets you. And my favorite like song, 2 songs really that are kind of transitional. They do these like interlude songs, if you will, and actually in the track listing on the album, they're just symbols, but the symbols also mean something. And one of them is the Ripe and Ruin, and it has this beautiful kind of a cappella, two guys singing, and they're like switching the harmonies up and down, switching the parts up and down. That like moves into Tessellate, which is like one of my favorite songs potentially of all time. And it's this beautiful song that Alt J does that is this interesting kind of complete encapsulation of who they are. It's almost like an introduction of, hey, this is us as a band. Because one of the lyrics is, triangles are my favorite shape. 3 points where 2 lines meet. Toe to toe, back to back. Let's go. My love, it's getting late. Anyway, but it's beautiful. 3 lines, 3 points where 2 lines meet. 2 lines meet at 3 points. Interesting idea of the triangle. Breaking it down. But again, beautiful song, cool lyrics, really cool beat, really cool vibe. Like, it's like one of those songs where you fucking blast it, and it's a really cool song to listen to on vinyl. And I did once on acid, and it was really interesting. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was. I didn't know what to expect, really. But just a really, really, really great experience. And, you never know what to expect. I mean, one time I took acid and listened to Jimi Hendrix, or I think it was Are You Experienced, or I think it's Are You Experienced, and it was a little bit scary at some points. Hey, what do you know? But again, I wish I went to the show. I hope I get to see them again, maybe their 15th or 20th anniversary of An Awesome Wave. But again, just an album that really stuck with me. And it wasn't just because it was a steady album. But one of those albums where, when I first kind of started getting into vinyl too, it was kind of one of those albums where I was like, I need to get this on vinyl just because the sounds in it are beautiful. It was a lot like, I wanted to get, the reason why I bought Astral Weeks, Van Morrison's first album. I bought that because of the sounds and the beautiful production of that album, and I wanted to hear it in vinyl, just because you get that fidelity, you get that beautiful audio. It's just a great modern album that you can get on vinyl and get away with that. Again, it really depends on the artist sometimes, because a lot of modern music production, sometimes you're not necessarily mastering it or mixing the album for vinyl. It works, don't get me wrong, it sounds great still because of just the fact that it's analog. But in a bands potentially that like Reckless Harbor, that are more Canadiana, indie folk kind of thing, you can potentially mix and prepare the album with that in mind, and it'll still sound fine on other platforms, but eventually you're going to put it down on vinyl. So that's a really interesting approach with music these days, and how music is driven by the way people listen to it, right? Because obviously if you're a musician, you want to get your music out to people, you want people to hear your music, you're gonna want to have to, oh my God, what the fuck am I saying? You're going to want that music to get out there somehow. And if however people are listening to that, you have to be cognizant and aware of that, and have your fucking ear to the ground to know that shit's fucking going down, right? As people were moving from vinyl to tape to CD, you didn't want to get caught just thinking, oh, all we can do is 48 minutes, when all of a sudden we're doing CDs now where you can do fucking way over an hour of music on a CD. I think in the early days it was still fairly limited, but then all of a sudden streaming comes and you can just do whatever you want, really, right? So you don't want to be limited with certain technologies. But like I've said a million times before, I think in many ways that actually drives a lot of creativity, is actually those constraints sometimes. And it allows you to work within parameters and test those boundaries and find those boundaries and go completely to the extremes if you need to, right? If you want to play in the middle of the road, you got to know where the edges are. But again, An Awesome Wave, Alt J, everything they've done, new albums, older albums, just a brilliant band doing brilliant things. They're young. I wish them all the luck. I hope they continue to play as long as possible, because I want to get to see you guys. So maybe it'll be in a cool place, man. I gotta start doing some shit like that in my life. Like planning a trip somewhere, but have the nugget, the grain of sand at the center of the pearl be, a concert, and then the pearl is the rest of the vacation around said destination. Maybe I'm onto something there. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. Thank y'all for listening. I love y'all. Go listen to fucking Alt J. They're the shit. Check out the Patreon. Like, subscribe, follow along, tell your friends. Get out there and tessellate. Peace.